Part 1. Adebayo's heart raced as he weaved through the bustling crowds of Oshodi Market in Lagos. The cacophony of haggling voices and honking Okadas faded into the background as his eyes locked onto the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. She stood out like a goddess among mortals, her ebony skin glowing under the harsh Nigerian sun. Her wrapper, a vibrant mix of reds and golds, hugged her curves in all the right places. But it was her eyes that truly captivated him, pools of midnight that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. Without thinking, Adebayo shouldered his way through the throng of people, desperate to reach her before she disappeared into the crowd. He stumbled over a crate of tomatoes, earning a string of curses from the vendor, but he didn't care. All that mattered was getting to her. Just as he was about to call out, the woman turned and their eyes met. The world around them seemed to freeze. Adebayo felt a jolt of electricity course through his body, leaving him breathless. The woman's full lips curved into a smile that made his knees weak. "I'm Adebayo," he blurted out, his voice cracking like a schoolboy's. The woman's smile widened, revealing teeth as white as fresh palm wine. "Folake," she replied, her voice as smooth as shea butter. "I know this is forward, but can I buy you a drink?" Adebayo asked, praying to every Orisha he could think of that she'd say yes. Folake's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Bold, aren't you? But I like that in a man. There's a palm wine spot just around the corner. Lead the way, Adebayo." As they walked, Adebayo couldn't believe his luck. He'd always scoffed at the idea of love at first sight, dismissing it as something from those cheesy Nollywood movies his sister loved. But now, with Folek by his side, he was ready to eat his words. They settled into a dimly lit corner of the palm wine bar, the sweet scent of fermented sap filling the air. As they sipped their drinks, Adebayo found himself spilling his life story to Falak. He told her about his job as a software developer, his dreams of starting his own tech company, and even about the time he accidentally set his aunt's wig on fire during a New Year's party. Folake laughed at all the right moments, her eyes never leaving his face. When she spoke, Adebayo hung on her every word. She was a fashion designer, she told him, specializing in modernizing traditional Nigerian attire. Her latest collection was inspired by Yoruba mythology. "I've always been fascinated by our old stories," Folake said, leaning in close. "The gods, the spirits, the magic. Don't you think there's something powerful about them?" Adebayo nodded eagerly, though, truth be told, he'd never given much thought to the old ways. His parents had raised him Christian, and he'd always been more interested in coding than folklore. But if Folake was into it, he was suddenly very interested. As the palm wine flowed, so did the conversation. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. The bar owner had to practically shoo them out at closing time. Standing outside in the warm Lagos night, Adebayo realized he didn't want the evening to end. "Can I see you again?" he asked, his heart pounding. Falak's smile turned mysterious. "I'd like that, but let's make it interesting. Meet me tomorrow night at the abandoned Igunuko Shrine in Epe, midnight." Adebayo's eyebrows shot up. "The shrine? At midnight? Isn't that a bit, creepy?" Folake laughed, the sound sending shivers down his spine. "Don't tell me you're scared, Adebayo. Where's that boldness I like so much?" She leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear. "Trust me, it'll be worth it." Before he could respond, she melted into the shadows, leaving him standing alone with his heart racing and his head spinning. The next day crawled by at an agonizing pace. Adebayo couldn't focus on work, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Folake. He found himself Googling the Igunuko Shrine, reading about its history as a place of worship for the masquerade spirits. Most of the articles mentioned that it had been abandoned for decades, with locals avoiding it due to stories of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. A small voice in the back of Adebayo's mind warned him that this was a bad idea. Meeting a woman he barely knew at an abandoned shrine in the middle of the night? It sounded like the setup for one of those cautionary tales his grandmother used to tell. But every time he considered backing out, he remembered Folak's smile, the warmth of her skin, the depth of her eyes. He was hooked, and he knew it. As night fell, Adebayo made his way to Epe. The drive was long, and with each passing kilometer, the buildings grew sparser and the roads rougher. By the time he reached the turnoff for the shrine, he was surrounded by dense forest, the trees casting eerie shadows in his headlights. He parked his car at the edge of a clearing and continued on foot. As night fell, Adebayo made his way to Epe. The drive was long, and with each passing kilometer, the buildings grew sparser and the roads rougher. By the time he reached the turnoff for the shrine, he was surrounded by dense forest, the trees casting eerie shadows in his headlights. He parked his car at the edge of a clearing and continued on foot, guided only by the pale light of the moon and his phone's flashlight. The shrine loomed before him, a crumbling structure half swallowed by vines and creepers. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Folak," he called out, his voice sounding small in the oppressive silence of the forest. "You came." Her voice drifted from the darkness, sending a jolt through his body. "I'm glad." Folake stepped into view, and Adebayo's breath caught in his throat. She was even more stunning than he remembered, dressed in a flowing white gown that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Her eyes, when they met his, were filled with an intensity that both thrilled and unnerved him. "What are we doing here?" Adebayo asked, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Folake's smile was enigmatic. "I told you I was fascinated by the old ways, didn't I? This place, it's special, powerful. I wanted to share it with you." She held out her hand, and without hesitation, Adebayo took it. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost unnaturally so. She led him towards the entrance of the shrine, the crumbling archway looming over them like the maw of some great beast. As they crossed the threshold, Adebayo felt a shift in the air, as if they'd stepped into another world entirely. The sounds of the forest fell away, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by their footsteps and the pounding of his heart. The interior of the shrine was a maze of shadowy corridors and small cell-like rooms. Faded paintings covered the walls, depicting masked figures dancing in frenzied circles. In the center of the main chamber stood a massive stone altar, its surface stained dark with what Adebayo prayed was just centuries of mold and decay. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Folake whispered, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. "Can you feel the power here? The history?" Adebayo nodded, not trusting himself to speak. There was indeed a palpable energy in the air, but it didn't feel beautiful to him. It felt oppressive, hungry, like something ancient and terrible was watching their every move. Folake led him to the altar, her movements graceful and purposeful. She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Adebayo," she said, her voice taking on a resonance that seemed to fill the entire shrine. "Do you believe in destiny?" I don't know," he stammered, finding it hard to think straight with her so close, in this strange and unsettling place. "I do," Folake continued. "I believe we were meant to meet, that you were meant to come here tonight, to be part of something greater." Before Adebayo could ask what she meant, Folake leaned in and kissed him. Her lips were cold, but the kiss ignited a fire in his blood. He felt dizzy, overwhelmed by sensation. When she pulled away, he swayed on his feet, his vision blurring at the edges. What? What's happening? He slurred, his tongue feeling too big for his mouth. Folake's smile was radiant, but there was something predatory in her eyes now. Don't fight it, my love. Let the magic take hold. Let Olorun open your eyes to the truth. Adebayo tried to step back, but his legs wouldn't obey. He felt himself falling, the world spinning around him. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Folake standing over him, her eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light. Sleep now, her voice echoed in his mind. When you wake, you'll see the world as it truly is. And then, my darling, the real fun will begin. To be continued.